on the consent agenda. So Ian, would you do me the favor and read in the notice of electronic meeting, please?
Sure thing. The governor has declared a state of emergency due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and the nature of this declared emergency makes it impracticable or unsafe for the Central Virginia Regional Housing Partnership to assemble in a single location. This meeting will be held utilizing electronic virtual communication with a Zoom software application and in accordance with virtual meeting procedures and policies as outlined in item 4.001 of the Virginia State Budget, HB 29, as effective April 24th, 2020. The meeting will be recorded and made available to the public at www.tjpdc.org.
So thank you, Ian. I'll tell you what, I'm going to ask Ian to just do a quick roll call through the list just to make sure we've got who's in attendance, and then we'll move forward with the meeting.
All right. I'm going to mispronounce some folks' names, but I'm going to go ahead and try my best. So
You'll do great.
Allison Rocher. Okay. Anthony Harrow.
Present.
Brandon Collins. Chris Henry. Christopher Bremen. Colette Sheehy.
Here.
Dan Rosenzweig. Denise Bonds.
Here.
Diantha McKeel.
Here.
Jaquetta Murray Key. Greg Powell.
Here.
Jay Willer. Jeff Waite. Jesse Rutherford.
Here.
Keith Smith.
Here.
Lloyd Snook.
Here.
Margaret Clare.
Here.
Michael Payne. Mazel Booker. Ned Galloway.
Here.
Peter Holman. Robert Babcock. Sunshine Mathone.
Present.
Great. Thank you.
Need one more for a quorum, so we'll just move on through the meeting. Hopefully we'll get one other person to jump in so we can tackle the consent agenda. So the next item on is comments from the public. We're going to have two of them. We're going to give an opportunity at the back end of the meeting for that again. So anybody from the public would like to make some comments? All right, hearing none, we're going to move on and skip the consent agenda and head over to the events committee. That is Stacy and Ian are going to tackle that. So I guess Stacy, you'll start off first, and then Ian will talk to us a little about the good news about the governor's housing conference. So the floor is yours, Stacy.
Thank you, Keith. The events committee met last week or the week before to really begin finalizing the fall spring speaker series. So we have confirmed dates for 4 of those. We'll be doing one in October. That's on the 21st. That will be the first one. And that's really an opportunity for all of the localities in the PDC area to provide an update on their affordable housing activities. I believe we have confirmed speakers for all 6 localities. Is that right, Ian?
No, so we have 4 confirmed. We're still working on getting folks confirmed from Nelson and Louisa.
Great, thank you. And we will set up a meeting with everybody, all of the speakers closer to that date, just so we can figure out what we're all going to talk about. And are considering expanding the time on that one if all 6 localities come and speak. That way we have time for everybody to give an update and then for any questions that may happen afterwards, but we'll figure that out soon. The next one is on November 16th, and that's really looking at rural housing challenges. I believe Jesse is going to be one of the panelists. Jonathan Knopp from Housing Forward Virginia. They changed the name on me. I can never remember what it is. And I believe we're looking to finalize one final speaker on that. The next two will be after the new year. So one in January, which will really talk about missing middle housing. And we are looking for panelists for that. And then in February, on the 17th of February, there'll be a session on faith-based organizations and affordable housing. Greg Powell, I believe you're going to help find some local organizations to be on the panel. I'm also going to reach out to FaithWorks. They really focus on Northern Virginia, and they do more than just housing. They do a lot of work with addressing homelessness, more community-based activities, such as building playgrounds in neighborhoods that have never had one. They've been around for a long time, and they're interfaith, and really FaithWorks helps organize activities for different groups. I've known the executive director since 2001, and they do some really good work. So I'm going to reach out and see if he would be interested on being on the panel. That's really the update that I have for all of that. We are we're looking into the possibility of doing another in-person summit in the fall of next year. If we're going to do that, we have to start planning for that now. We're just sort of weighing the pros and cons and whether or not we think everything will be safe to move forward. But we sort of have the opinion that at some point in time, we're gonna have to figure out how to do that anyway. We can't always meet forever on a screen. So we will, we're doing some thinking of that. We'll bring that information back to you soon. That's all that I have, Ian.
Before you jump in, Ian, Stacy, thank you very much. Anybody that can help with some speakers on missing middle, I'm working on a couple of folks out in Portland and Seattle to help chime in that. But if anybody knows anybody, any experts in the missing middle category, please reach out to Stacy. Ian, the floor is yours, sir.
Sure. Yeah, actually, I don't think I told Stacy we had some more folks commit to being speakers. So I just want to, there's an additional panelist for our November 16th Rural Housing Challenges session, who's going to be, it's Colleen Fisher, who's the executive director of the Council for Affordable and Rural Housing. And then for the missing middle panel, we actually have two confirmed speakers for that. Sorry about that. We have Suzanne Muma, who's the current chair of the Urban Environmental Planning Program at UVA's Architecture School, as well as Emily Hamilton, who is a researcher at the Mercatus Institute at George Mason University. So really happy with those two panelists, but we are, looking for one other person, but that isn't until January. So that we're taking a little bit of a break between the fall and the early winter speaker series. But I guess the other thing to talk about is we have been chosen by the organizers of the Virginia Governor's Housing Conference. We are going to have a 45-minute session about the Central Virginia Regional Housing Partnership. I had a call with Chris Thompson at Virginia Housing this week, and it looks like our two presenters / panelists are going to be our chair and vice chair, Keith Smith and Ned Galloway. In Norfolk. We're not sure the exact day of the event yet, but the Governor's Housing Conference takes place from November 10th to 12th. So that's a Wednesday through Friday in early November. So we're really excited about that opportunity. We're going to get together and figure out what that session will look like, but presumably it'll be more sort of a history about what the Central Virginia Regional Housing Partnership is, what we've been able to accomplish, and then sort of where we're going. And that'll include, Christine will talk to this later, but what the strategic plan process will look like for us as an organization. And then, all of this new funding that's coming in that we're sort of managing. So that's really exciting opportunity. And I'm really looking forward to being down there in Norfolk with the team. So that's the update from the events side of things.
That's exciting news, and totally looking forward to do it. Any questions for Stacy or Ian from the group? So it looks like, go ahead.
Stacy, let's talk about speakers. This is the first I've heard date. And I have 3 speakers in mind for the one in February.
We're not too concerned about that until we get through the first session, and then.
Well, let's talk, and then I'll invite 3 of my clients that are all religious-based groups.
Great.
Faith-based.
Thank you, Greg. So any other questions on the subject, on the topic? So it looks like Christopher Bremen just showed up, so that by my count gets us to 12. So I'm going to go back to the consent agenda and the draft minutes from June 23rd of this year. I'm assuming everybody had an opportunity to read it, of course. Any edits, omissions, corrections? If none, I would love to take a first and a second and check this box.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Greg. Can I get a second, please?
Second.
So instead of doing a roll call vote, I'm just going to simply ask for a voice vote. And frankly, what we'll do is whoever would, I'll just say a nay vote. And if we have a nay vote, then we'll record it that way. Otherwise, we'll just go on the assumption everybody gives a thumbs up if it's okay with everybody. So does anybody object to adopting the consent agenda? All right, so we're going to assume it's approved and move forward on that. So I am going to take a little chairman's prerogative and divert from the agenda at the moment. Since Christine just joined us, I would want to take a moment and introduce our new executive director for the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission to everybody on the panel on this committee. We're super excited about it. I believe, Mr. Chairman of the Planning District Commission, would you like to say a few words, sir, or would you like me to continue to babble?
Keep going, man. You keep going. Doing a great
right?
job.
Well, anyway, I just wanted to say thank you. It was Christine has put in an awesome amount of hard work these months as interim, wearing multiple hats simultaneously, doing multiple jobs, and just thank you. Thank you for accepting, and I look forward to the future of the organization. It's going to be in great hands.
I guess.
Yeah.
I'll add one thing. I'll add one thing. We, of course, you know, Christine's roots do come from this group in a strong sense. So, of course, she's extremely committed to the cause, and we look forward to lots of success and more movement in the right direction. So, thank you, Christine, and everybody. Thank you all for being supportive of Christine. And hey, we're going to address a lot of issues and get some stuff figured out, hopefully. That's it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. So, Mrs. Executive Director, or whatever the pronoun on that is, so I apologize if I messed that up, but the new Executive Director, you're up next.
Thank you for that. That was very thoughtful. And thank you for the comments also in the chat box. It's very kind of you all. It is a labor of love. So I feel to be the one grateful to be in this position and super excited for us at the PDC. Since I have the next couple of items in a row on the agenda, I went ahead and put them all into a PowerPoint just because I'm a visual person and I tend to check out when I get talked at. So I do have a visual PowerPoint that I'm going to share my screen. I'll lose you for a quick second before I can pull it all the way up. Can you all see my screen? And I'm about to put it into presentation mode. There we go. Yes, you can see my screen okay? Very good. I can't see you all, so I'm assuming that's a yes. So the first item I have is the FY 22 and 23 budgets. The Executive Committee has been working diligently to try to think through a sustainable financial model for the Regional Housing Partnership. We've been around a couple different versions of what we thought would work, and I just wanted to share with you all some of the changes that have occurred since the last time that we were all together. So I put those in a table. On the left-hand side was the original budget that we brought to you all in June, August, September. Yep, the last meeting. And originally what we had is that the TJPDC would contribute from its per capita regional fund, $25,000. We would be asking an immediate one-time ask from the local governments at $28,000, but prorated by per capita. We would be asking of you all partners within the CVRHP to contribute, and then also seeking grants and scholarships. In considering going to our local governments and our partners in an off-budget cycle, we had concerns, and some of our local governments had concerns, that if we wanted to ask for a recurring contribution from the local governments, that would need to occur now within the budget cycle for FY23. And so on the right-hand side is a revision to that FY22 budget, where we would have, are you guys seeing the full table? I want to make sure that this little bar is not in the way. Yes. you're seeing
Christine, we see both sides.
Okay, perfect. On the right-hand side, it is contributing the 25,000 per capita still, as we already have that budgeted. It is continuing to seek additional grant funding to get us through FY22. It is assuming that we will run a very lean FY22 year, focusing the majority of our energy and staff time on strategic planning, continuing to seek sponsorships for the events that we're holding. Mind you, 20,000 of that is a pass-through to a consultant that is pending approval from Virginia Housing that we get that grant. What that means for then FY23, I'm now on to FY23, is now we're going to ask of our local governments a recurring annual contribution to support the Regional Housing Partnership. So that combines the 25 that we were using out of our regional fund, and instead is asking each of our jurisdictions to support us at a prorated based on their population to support the Regional Housing Partnership annually. Those are requests that I have to make immediately this fall within this cycle. So instead of asking for a one-time for FY22, we're going to not ask for that one-time expense. We are instead going to ask for a recurring annual contribution. That would then have us still asking our local partners for contributions, but trying to put it onto the same budget rotation. So basically that is what we previously asked you all to contribute. We would be asking for you to contribute that towards the FY23 budget, so that we would be asking in advance of each fiscal year for funding to support in the next fiscal year. This also assumes that we're going to be diligent and continue to be asking for grants and sponsorships for our events and for any priorities that come out of the strategic planning session, but that would get us to a very doable, sustainable annual revenue of around $72,000. So I wanted to share that with you all because that is a change from what we were going to do last time. Before moving forward to the next ones, I'm happy to take any questions, or if you have other questions for the executive committee on this decision to make a change, we're happy to take them.
So I would like to say thank you to the executive committee. We and the team, we've been working on this budget, seems like forever. And we've landed on, as Christine has outlined, it didn't make sense to ask for an off-cycle request. We retweaked our budget and our goals and objectives for the balance of this fiscal year and setting up fiscal year 2023 to be successful from a fiscal perspective. Any questions for Christine on the budget? All right. Hearing none and not seeing any hands. Ian, do we have any hands up that I'm missing? Okay. Executive Director's report.
Okay, I am going to take the executive director's prerogative and change this to staff updates, so that each time it is not necessarily I'm giving them, but I'm going to rely on Ian as he's taking over some of that programming. So our staff updates, the first two, I'm actually going to turn over to Ian because he has been our point on both of these larger grants. Ian, take it away.
Hey everyone. So, and I know I've met some of you and I haven't met others of you. So my name is
doing that, Ian.
Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, to introduce myself. But I started at the I'm a new regional planner, and I started at the Planning Commission in late July. And so all of you are obviously, you know, Lucinda. I am taking over the Regional Housing Partnership from her. She did a great job, but her heart is in transportation. So I'm happy to be here. I'm really happy to be working with all of you and really get stuck in. And so the first two things are really my major priorities as a staff member here at the TJPDC. And I'll begin with talking about the VERP planning grant. That's the Virginia Eviction Reduction Pilot Planning Grant. It's kind of a mouthful. What we're doing right now is we've contracted services from the UVA Equity Center to create a comprehensive eviction database to sort of determine where evictions are happening and which property companies are evicting the most people or bringing the most judgments, or I guess cases. Really having a comprehensive look at the statistics and data surrounding evictions in our region. We're working with a consulting group called Knowledge Advisory Group to take that information, talk to the partners involved in our advisory committee, so basically all the sort of stakeholders you would think are associated with housing and eviction, and come up with a work plan that we're going to eventually apply for an implementation grant with, which I'll talk about in a second. And then also we're working with the city of Charlottesville, who is donating some staff time to work through and doing some focus groups with tenants, landlords, and judges here in the region, and really thinking about what some of the best practices are in terms of reducing eviction in our region. But that's the planning grant. And so there are essentially some localities and organizations that have already been given an implementation grant, which is a little fuzzier for us because we haven't seen the new sort of VERP 1.0 is what they're in right now. And those implementation grants, they're going to a variety of things, including rental assistance, stabilization services. So allowing, the money's allowed to be spent on transportation costs, keeping people in jobs so they don't get evicted, as well as support services. So housing counseling and financial counseling. So we're kind of operating under the assumption that the implementation grant guidelines for the most part will be pretty similar to what they are now for the current grantees. But we're not sure exactly what the timeline is for the receiving that grant or even applying for it. We're going to turn around the work plan we complete at the end of October to DHED, but then we also have to reapply for the actual grant, and probably in the winter. And I attended a DHED-led VERP retreat about 2 Fridays ago, and they didn't necessarily have all the answers to these questions that I wanted. So we're kind of in limbo there with that, but we are coming up on the end of our actual VERP planning grant term, which ends at the end of October. By the end of October, we'll be completing or submitting a work plan that has this comprehensive eviction database, as well as some of the best practices recommendations from the consultants that we've hired. So that's where we are with VERP. Pretty excited to see where that goes and how much money we end up getting for an implementation grant, but it's been really cool to convene this advisory committee of all these stakeholders and really think regionally about eviction reduction. So the next, I guess, does anyone have any questions on that? I'll try and answer if so. Cool, not seeing any hands. And so the second major initiative, which we are working on, is the Virginia Housing Development Grant. And so this is a grant that was given or offered and eventually given to every planning district commission in the state. There are a few different variations of this depending on your population. There's either $1 million, $2 million, or $3 million grants. We ended up receiving $2 million to develop at least 20 units of affordable housing by, I believe, June 2023. The guidelines and stipulations for this grant have changed a little bit since we were given given the award. Instead of having just one
recipient.
Yeah, sorry, I heard a little echo. One recipient, we're allowed to actually use it as gap funding. So we're gonna be able to have multiple recipients and multiple partners in this, which makes it really exciting because it means it'll be a little easier to spread it out regionally. Other than that, we're still hoping to have either a proof of concept or the formal RFP. We're sort of probably gonna have later in the fall, but we wanna start having we want to release something called a proof of concept or something similar to that we can start having informal, or we've had informal conversations with individuals and organizations that are interested in this money. We want to be able to draw up a document or draw up some form that really kind of crystallizes some of the details so that we can have this iterative process before we actually make formal choices about what developer partners we're going to be working with or what nonprofit partners we're going to be working with. So we're really excited about that. Hoping to get that out by the end of October, something formal to give around to partners and folks that we've already been speaking to about this, but that's kind of where that is right now. Anthony, I see your hand.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. You mentioned that one of the, I guess, intentions for the grant was to develop, did you say 20 units by 2023?
Yes.
So to have like plans in place by 2023, or for the units to be like done?
They-
What is,
Done and move-in ready.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's pretty fast. I mean, it seems pretty fast. Luckily, they've kind of relaxed the guidelines that being able to provide like gap funding for, let's say, a project that's just trying to meet some certain amount of money that's
Right.
already, zoned and already gone through some of the pre-development phases. That should make it a little bit faster. But yeah, it's a pretty aggressive timeline, and I really think that luckily Virginia Housing has been really, really receptive to any and all questions because they're working with every PDC. They're really and that every PDC presumably will be done with this housing by the end of 2023. And if there's a possible extension that some might need to have, but before 2020, the end of 2024, there will be all of this new housing constructed via this money. So yeah, it's a fast turnaround, but it's exciting to get into this arena, as the TJPDC. So
absolutely, thanks.
Any other
And one thing
questions?
I'd love to add, as we've told you all in the past, Virginia Housing has been very high touch on this grant. So they've organized a work group of all of the track 1 grant recipients that are going to be meeting monthly. And in many ways, that's extremely helpful to be working with our colleagues at other PDCs and how they're going to deploy this funding. And in other ways, frankly, it sticks us to a timeline that isn't as aggressive as we at the PDC here would like. So we're still trying to be really ambitious with our timeline, get something out to potential subrecipients by the end of October. With that said, we're also sensitive to the fact that we kind of have to stay in line with our track and with Virginia Housing and not move faster than they're comfortable. This is a pilot for them, so they are building this plane as we all fly it and trying to be mindful of that the needs are different in each region. And so we've been really happy with their support, but also are trying to be very patient with the process to make sure that we can get this funding out as quickly as possible to partners that have projects that are ready to go.
Any other thoughts
Any
or
other-
questions?
Yeah.
So Christine, I think you're number 3.
All right, number 3, regional housing plan. This will be quick. You guys recommended it to the commission. The last time we met, the commission approved it as the regional housing plan. Since then, the only updates I have is that some of our local jurisdictions have asked us to come and present. So we most recently were in Nelson County. Previous to that, we were in Fluvanna County. And now just trying to provide support to the local jurisdictions in how they anticipate using this plan. Obviously, everybody's at different stages of the development of their comprehensive plans. And so this document is useful in different ways. So we're continuing to do anything we can, whether that's presenting or helping support their planning departments to utilize the information within that plan. Other than that, no real big updates. I just wanted to throw that in. Number 4 is home ARPA funding. As you all know, our region was awarded $2.4 million in home funding. We just recently, actually, since we sent out the agenda, we just recently received the ARPA program guidelines. If you guys will be patient with us, they're about 150 pages long. So our staff is now digging into those guidelines so that we can begin to stand up that program. It will operate very similar to the annual home funding in that we're going to have to submit to HUD an allocation plan that demonstrates how we intend to use that funding across the years and across jurisdictions and based on the housing needs. It does have very specific requirements for the populations that it can serve. It's intended specifically to serve those at risk of homelessness or experiencing homelessness or fleeing specific situations such as domestic violence or sexual assault. It's also intended for specific activities. So the more that we read about that, we'll continue to bring you all updates as HUD sends out updates. I can say that they just recently scheduled a 4-series training webinar series. So staff will be attending that and we'll be keeping you guys apprised of what's going to happen with that funding across time. Happy to take questions, but not having read the guidelines yet, I'm hoping they're not too difficult. Okay, And then the last one on there, I think, is the last one that I have, and that's strategic plan. So I'm going to go to the next set of slides for that. So strategic planning, quick overview. We applied for $20,000 from Virginia Housing. As the executive committee is well aware, there was a hiccup in the application in that they found that the TJPDC had an active strategic plan, and so made an assumption. It was actually new staff members at Virginia Housing were reviewing the applications. They made an assumption that we were not eligible because we had an existing strategic plan for the PDC, not recognizing that the application was actually for the Regional Housing Partnership to have a strategic plan. So initially we were denied that application, but in reaching out to our contacts there, they said, resubmit it, put that note in there. We'll make sure that when it gets reviewed again, that that's abundantly clear. So we are awaiting award notification on that. It's not expected until the end of October, mid-November, because it has to go through their formal review process again. If you guys will recall, we have the Spark Mill consultant was the RFP that we selected. We have been in touch with the Spark Mill to let them know that as soon as this money is available, we would like to start. And frankly, we would love to kick it off early and are willing to commit the funding early, even if we don't get the grant. And so if you see on the right-hand side, that was the proposed budget from the Spark Mill. Staff would like to recommend that we go ahead and begin the both the kickoff meetings and what they're calling a staff retreat. Staff here at the PDC would like to recommend that rather than that being a staff retreat, that be the steering committee, and that the executive committee serve as that steering committee. So in their monthly meetings, they will serve as the steering group for the strategic plan. So basically what I'm recommending is we go ahead and get our strategic planning started without knowing whether or not we've received that award. If for some reason we do not receive the award, which it's been indicated to us that we will, but if we do not receive that award, we will go to Plan B for making sure we get the funding to continue that strategic planning, because it's such a critical part of the RHP's developmental stage right now. So happy to take questions on that, but basically what this means is right after this meeting, I will contact the Spark Mill and I will go ahead and begin to schedule the kickoff and the steering committee retreat.
So Christina, do you need that in a form of a motion or just a consent, basically?
Yeah, it's just pretty much consensus that everybody agrees with moving forward. We've all talked in the executive committee how important the strategic planning process is for where we are. And I don't want it, and the executive committee recommended that we not delay it till late October, mid-November. So it's just more of letting you all know that that's our intention.
Great. So I think I'll take it from this approach. Does anybody have any objections for us moving forward with this process? All right. Hearing none. Sorry about my muting. Christine, is that anything else to add to your?
Nope, that's all of the things that I had on the agenda.
Thank you for putting those slides together. It made it easy to follow over at least on my end. Before we're running a little bit ahead of schedule. Before we jump into our next item, which is the roundtable discussion, does anybody have any other thoughts on the strategic plan or comments to add to that? Okay. We're moving along pretty good. So
Keith, sorry to interrupt. I will say the one thing related to the FY23 budget is, and we'll talk about it in the executive committee meeting before doing so, but I would anticipate that at the start of the calendar year, we'll be sending out official letters requesting funding for FY23 from the partners other than the local governments.
Yeah, at least on my end of it, I just assumed that that's coming pretty quickly since your request season is starting with the local governments, and
yep.
That request would follow throughout to the rest of the partners. Anything else, Christine, you want to add? So our next topic is the roundtable, and for those, I'm just going to reiterate this because we started a little bit in the beginning before the meeting got started. I really, this is something we haven't really done much of in our last few meetings, either executive and or the large meetings. It seems to be very beneficial. So I kind of want to make this a little bit two-way. You know, I'll chat with somebody, have them report in. Maybe they might be able to share some thoughts from their perspective on what they will hope would happen with the strategic plan. But if somebody wants to jump in and ask a question of that individual, I would just ask you to, physically raise your hand so I can recognize you, so we don't have a little crosstalk going on. But I really would like to have some two-way chatter move forward on that. So I'm just going to go by alphabetical order. And Anthony, you're the lucky guy. So Anthony, what's going on in your world, and what can we do to help the homeless, and what do you think about the strategic plan process? So,
Thanks, Keith. Everybody. What's new in our world is our non-congregate shelter project, Premier Circle, is still moving along with our partner with PHA. Sunshine's on here, and a lot of other partners on the call have made that project possible. Additionally, too, as we move towards the winter, we're trying to figure out how do we also meet additional shelter needs, which is definitely a big need that's occurring. Essentially, in a nutshell, the turnover, in a hotel-like environment for that shelter project, particularly because of the nature of the project being private rooms, but also very much the lack of affordable housing in the community has made turnover in shelters really low. And so we need we're trying to figure out how to get additional shelter capacity this winter. So focusing on that with some community partners, trying to figure out the best way to bring that through. Otherwise, talking a little bit about that project and permanent supportive housing in particular next week with Stacy, which is pretty cool, in Fredericksburg. So highlighting some of the work that we've been able to do here about permanent supportive housing as a way to address chronic homelessness. So it's kind of nice to be able to draw that highlight. And I think that's about it in terms of the big updates in our work. Let's see, what do I think of the strategic plan idea? Is that what you asked, Keith?
Well, I'm just thinking out loud, from your specialty, what would you like to see in the strategic plan? Because, the executive committee is going to start this beginning process. And what I want to do is I want to hear from you and your specialty, and from the homelessness perspective, what would you like to see this strategic plan to look at from your perspective, so I could take notes?
Something that comes to mind quickly is something I've shared with Colette about, in regards to UVA's affordable housing plan, but it's just to always include homelessness as a part of new developments, new opportunities for housing. There are ways to incorporate units specifically designated for people experiencing homelessness, particularly chronically homeless or chronic homelessness. And there's ways to make it really sustainable. It works. Data is really supportive if you have supportive services in the picture. And so, but without really especially holding those aside units for people experiencing homelessness, it is difficult for people to get into units. And so that's, I think, for me, really a clear priority that I would like to see regionally, is that we work and make sure that there are ways for developers to include units specifically set aside for this population, and also to do it and feel supported in that, because I can understand why it's a unique population and the needs are unique, and so there are ways to really make sure that works. But that would be what I would put forward.
Thank you, Anthony. Anybody have any questions for Anthony? All right, going down alphabetically, Christopher Bremen, you are up next, sir.
Hi, everybody. I'll report today briefly on behalf of the Blue Ridge Home Builders Association, and specifically working with Albemarle County. Our membership has voiced some headwinds that we're facing with the county in terms of permit process and issuance, among some other headwinds that we're facing. So we've identified a small round table of builder members and developer members that will participate with Jody Filardo, Michael Dellinger, and Amelia McCulley next Friday morning in a really, I think, positive, with positive will and intent to improve access to building permits and construction of new homes, all with the goal of home affordability in mind. So I think that's one thing that we're working on. It's one thing that we as an association are reacting to our members in addressing issues. Without speculating, I'll just offer that we're prepared to wear the same hat as an association on behalf of any other specific headwinds with other municipalities, where that is our mission for the Blue Ridge Home Builders Association. As it relates to the strategic plan, and at the risk of being a little generic, I celebrate the accomplishments of this body and a lot of the things that are put in motion. Christine, congratulations again. Maybe one objective for the strategic plan would be to establish specific, measurable, short, midterm, and long-term goals for this body.
Thank you, Christopher. Any questions for Christopher in his particular sector? How's lumber prices doing?
Some relief for sure. I regret that the creep in everything else that goes into a house has kind of filled that relief. But a flatter curve is a welcome curve.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. Colette, you are up next.
Hey, hi, everybody. I guess I would just kind of update the group on where the university is in our affordable housing project. I think a couple things. One is we continue to work with our consultant and try to offer some educational videos for the public. There are 2 of them up on our website. Currently, it's the first 2, and I think it's a series of 10 that the consultant will do. They're very, very basic kinds of videos to help. I think certainly not probably many people on this call, because you all are more expert in affordable housing, but residents, potential residents, the general public. So there's 2 of them up there. The second thing is community engagement and communications generally. I think you can't ever communicate too much on issues, and we maybe have not done the best job of that, but we're looking to kind of revamp our community engagement process. We're working with Kevin McDonald, who's our Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion on that. And we're now, a small group of us are now reaching out monthly to members of the community who are leaders in this space, just to kind of give them an update, be available to answer questions, that kind of thing. And our consultant has also kind of finished up her initial listening tour. And I thought maybe I would share some of the themes that she has heard from the community. She's talked to a lot of people and groups and individuals both. We're trying to distill these down into something that can be used as input to our RFP process when we get ready to do that solicitation for a potential developer. So one thing that folks shared was that they think that we need to address housing types at all levels of affordability. it's important to them that we consider the economic opportunity that a project like this would offer to the community, and therefore try to use local businesses, local contractors to the degree that that's possible. They certainly have voiced the desire for additional services within any one of the affordable housing developments, whether it's a medical clinic, a grocery store, pre-K education, that kind of thing. And let's see what else. Granted, I think that some of the folks that we've been working with are very cognizant of where the university's property is located and on, you know, what existed previously to the university. And so they're very strongly recommended that we acknowledge the site, any of the sites that we choose, acknowledge the history of those sites. Also important for whichever partner we choose to continue to involve the community in the process. And also the desire to collaborate with some of our local partners who work in this kind of space. So those are some of the big themes that we have heard repeatedly from people, and so we're going to try to fold those in. The next, we're still socializing our potential sites with our board members and with the board members of the UVA Foundation. You know, I think maybe we were a little bit too optimistic when we thought we could release those publicly by the end of September, but hopefully it will be shortly after that. That's great.
Thank you, Colin. Before I do ask the members for any questions, before you do that, what would you see from a UVA in your personal perspective that the strategic plan should look like?
I don't know. I guess from our perspective, where the university can best fit with the overall plan for affordable housing in the region. I think that we're, you know, very cognizant of the fact that we don't want to compete with other organizations who do this kind of work. So, and never having done it before, we're learning as we go. So, any kind of, you know, advice or strategy that the strategic plan could outline for the best role the university can play, I think would be good.
So you're looking for maybe some guidance from the strategic.
Yeah,
plan.
sure. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Any questions for Colette from the members? All right. Thank you, Colette. Denise Pond, you're up next.
Good afternoon, everybody. So the health department continues to struggle with a very large outbreak of COVID-19. I'd like to say that we were getting back to normal, and we thought we were over the summer, but the Delta variant has really started now. So we spend 90% of our time trying to deal with that. We've had pretty good uptake on vaccines, but not 100% obviously, and significant variation by locality as well. We're greatly appreciative of all of our partners and all of the organizations that have really pushed vaccine. We've gotten their employees vaccinated. So thank you very much. With regards to the strategic plan, I would love to see a recognition of health and all policies. That is not only about affordable housing, but it talks about in the context of individuals being able to access healthy foods and a place for recreation that's safe for all individuals. Certainly we know that health starts from having a safe place to stay, but it also depends on having access to good food and a place to exercise and access to your house of choice. Locally, isolated.
Thank you, Denise. Any input on the strategic plan that you'd like to see us to focus on from your perspective?
Again, just focusing on health and policies for that strategic plan. So we're looking at it from a global perspective.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Diantha McKeel, you are next.
These must be up. Yes, just a couple of comments about some of the things that are happening in Albemarle County and maybe tying them together. I'll try to do it in a conscious stream of thought, although that's usually the way I speak and think. But we continue to receive proposals and developments from developers that provide affordable housing. And one of our challenges is dealing with the pushback from the neighbors in the communities around that those affordable housing projects. Not to say they're not necessarily passing, but it is a struggle. It's a heavy lift. And to that end, I think it would be helpful perhaps in our strategic plan if we could think about how we might better communicate and educate the public about affordable housing and what it really means and what it is. I really liked someone mentioned the idea of short, mid-term, and long-term goals. I thought that was a great idea. I really would applaud that. I would also add that I would love to see us perhaps encourage more affordable housing with ADA units that are accessible, ADA accessible units, I think would be great. I think we don't have enough of those. And I guess I'm speaking for Albemarle County because we certainly have an older population. I think Colette's right, or maybe it was, I guess it was Dr. Bonds is right about access to food and recreation. And I think about parks, because certainly in my world, the parks are all on the exterior of the county, on the outer portions of the county, and not very many in the urban areas where people really need the tree canopies and the be able to have some parks and recreational areas. And I'll just end this with, of course, as the transit representative on this group, certainly I'm spending a lot of time dealing with transit and transit studies that are going on right now in Albemarle County. And we have often with our housing proposals, people talk about how there is a need for transit. We're trying to figure out how to make that really happen. And I would suggest that because of the connection to affordable housing and transit, they really have to be, I think, developed and reviewed together to some degree. So I would encourage this group to think about how we could maybe better involve transit into our discussions, or at least the folks in the communities. And I recognize that not maybe all the counties are working so much with transit, but I think some of us are. And it might be a good connection because certainly whether you're talking fixed route or on demand or commuter, it can take different forms, which could be applicable in all of our counties, depending on what the need is. And I guess, Keith, with that, I'll stop.
Thank you, Diantha. Any questions for Diantha from anybody else? All righty, so next up is Greg Powell, and it looks like we have some other folks joining us. So I'll round back up to the folks that joined up. We're going through a roundtable alphabetically. So looks like Mr. Henry joined us. So I'll go back and catch him a little bit later on the back end of it. So Greg, the floor is yours, sir.
Yes, we've been talking about faith-based projects. Some of you know Rachel's Haven, if you've read the papers through our zoning, speaking of NIMBYs, Diantha. We've got our zoning. Piedmont Housing Alliance is very kindly and earnestly trying to combine the small Rachel's Haven, which is 15 affordable units, some for developmentally disabled, combine that with the Park Street Christian Church, which wants to develop about 50 seniors units. And with the goal of combining the two to get enough critical mass to make developments feasible for both groups, which is very admirable. We've, and Park Street Christian Church is about to go through city rezoning on their own grounds for that. So support during the zoning process would be helpful. Similarly, we have a project out just outside the gates of Lake Monticello in Fluvanna County, where we're about to apply for upzoning for 120 senior units, and preliminary indications from county are very favorable for that. We're doing a dozen of the first homes out at Southwood, which is very exciting. Most of you know Southwood will be a mixed income group with Habitat building a lot of homes themselves. We've got another 27 family project up in an urban mixed use project in DC, which is fun. 27 urban families. Sites are always one of the keys to developing units. So if ever you come across a site that can handle 100 or so units plus, let me know. We've been able to create projects simply by bringing the right site to the right not-for-profits. With respect to the strategic plan, we've gone through, and all of the jurisdictions now have plans tentatively in place. And so the strategic plan perhaps could address how we as a group could help facilitate the implementation of their plans.
So you're referring to the housing plans that are being worked into the comprehensive plans and so
Correct.
forth and so forth. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else, Greg?
That's it. Thanks.
Any questions for Greg? I didn't count, I didn't add up, but what was the total number of those units you're working on?
Couple hundred.
Good job. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. So, Mr. Rutherford, Jesse Rutherford, you are up next, sir.
Oh, man. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate all the hard work that's being put in. Just kind of touching base in Nelson County, we have many different opportunities coming forward. Of course, on the topic of affordable housing, when I'm chair of Nelson County, I'm sure we'll get even more aggressive on the comprehensive plan, making sure that we're including that in our conversations and revisiting zoning, making sure that we have more by right uses so that people have the ability to build an affordable home. Kind of want to touch on one thing Diantha had mentioned with the education of what affordable housing is. I can agree with that. I wanted to give an example of kind of what that has looked like for me is, you know, if you look at certain statistics from the schools, how many kids are on free or reduced lunches? You know, I like to tell people, well, you know, in some of our school systems, that's, you know, 4 of those kids, 4 out of 5 kids in some situations, in some classrooms, it's their family. You know, go to a soccer game. It's 2/3 of the rec soccer team, you know, go to a baseball team, you know, you have to start making these things personal. It's your neighbor. It's the guy at the grocery store. It's your police officer, actually. People don't realize how personal this is. And when you have, you know, and I'm speaking with all the respect I can in the world, when you have affluent demographics, sometimes there's that disconnect there and they don't get to experience who those people are on more of a personal level. So my strategy has been often reminding people, hey, it's your neighbor, it's your kids in your kindergarten classroom for your kid. Make it personal. They got to start seeing these numbers, and they got to understand and start pointing at free and reduced lunch. I mean, Western Albemarle has plenty of folks who struggle, and I'm not sure what that number is, but it's probably close to 20, 30, 40%. You'd be amazed. So beyond that, Mr. Chair, I think Nelson County, we're trying to be a beacon and move forward, and hopefully with the new stuff we have and the new opportunities with Virginia Housing, and getting Nelson County to be supporting this commission long term, which is my goal and ambition. I believe it's going to make for some more successful conversations, and us addressing this on the regional basis is only good, and helps many of us know that we're not alone. So thank you.
Thanks, Jesse. From a rural jurisdictions perspective, what would you like to see the strategic plan to focus on?
I was going to be touched on some of that in the forum coming up, but we've got to start looking at zoning and saying more by right stuff, especially for bigger farm plots, making subdivisions easier, making so many different scenarios easier. I'll chime in some more as the week goes on.
Thank you, Jesse. I'm going to take chairman's prerogative and go last. So, Mr. Snook, you're up next.
Well, in Charlottesville, of course, we've got probably the best news that didn't get a lot of publicity was the arrival of James Freeze to be the new NDS director. He has been charged with two basic tasks. One is shepherding the comprehensive plan through to completion, and two is making sense out of our permitting process. Folks have long been complaining about Charlottesville and permitting and everything that's got to go through NDS and what a mess it is. And that's one of the things that he's specifically commissioned from the outset to get his hands around and to fix. We've, of course, not really had a director of NDS for about 3 years now. About 3 years ago, Teron Richardson, in essence, demoted the then present director, but didn't get anybody else in the job. So to a certain extent, things have been foundering a little bit. Beyond that, of course, we've been moving forward with the comprehensive plan. The big debate over the future land use map has gotten extraordinarily hot and even kind of sometimes personal. We've tried to tone that down a little bit, but it is what it is. We're hoping that the comp plan and the land use map will be done by the end of the year. At that point, we get to do the zoning code rewrite, which is going to be a real interesting experience as well. Let's see, there are a couple of projects that are going that have some that we're hoping will be going, and we'll have some real meaning. Two are the projects that PHA is doing, and Sunshine put something in the chat about the Park Street Christian Church, the MACA rezonings, which are two different but very closely linked, because they're only a few blocks away from each other, affordable projects in the city. Those, and one of the things that is interesting is that those are, whereas almost all of our affordable housing projects are located in the southern half of the city, these two are on the northern half of the city. They are north of the bypass even. And so this is a little bit more of sort of spreading it around and democratizing affordable housing a little bit. But anyway, we've just got a lot of things going on, a lot of discussions being had. One of the discussions that we've been having, of course, is simply about what does it mean to be trying to bring more affordable housing, and are we limiting our discussion only to the under 30% AMI, under 50%, under 80% AMI, or do we have to look more broadly at the general lack of supply in the housing market in Charlottesville as being partially responsible for the extent to which our single family house prices have been rising as well. I personally think that we should be using the comp plan process not only to discuss things like changing the land use map and changing R1 zoning, and specifically finding more ways to bring truly affordable units, but to broadly increase the supply. If you talk about the missing middle, you're talking both missing middle in terms of form of building, but also missing middle in terms of income level. The middle class folks who could afford to live or own a duplex, who can't afford to own a $500,000 house in a single family subdivision, that kind of thing. We have a real problem in that we are becoming almost inhospitable toward the people who actually make our city run, and we need to fix that. And I'm hoping that we will address that in the comp plan, not only affordable as it relates to the lower end of the spectrum, but also the middle needs help. So lots of things going on, lots of discussions being had. Hopefully some decisions will be made.
Thank you, Lloyd, for pointing out the income portion of the missing middle. Most folks focus on the structural, physical portion of it. From a city's perspective, strategic plan, any thoughts on that?
Well, I've been thinking about this in part because I've been looking at the way that other jurisdictions around the country have been handling it. I've often commented that we in Charlottesville do not want to become the next Palo Alto, California, where the median sales price is $3 million for a house, where the median 2-bedroom apartment is $3,000 a month, where the median income is $160,000, that kind of thing. So I started looking at some of what they've been doing in the Bay Area, and their idea of regional planning on this is really very much more aggressive and much more aggressive, frankly, than Virginia law would permit. But that doesn't mean we can't take some inspiration. Voters have, or the folks who have been talking to us over the last few months have been wanting us, what they've been saying is they want us to not do anything until we can plan, until we can have a common plan with the university and with the county. And of course, what I've said to them is, well, we can talk to one another, but we can't enter into a binding agreement where everybody is going to do X number of units and how they're going to do it. That degree of common power or regional government does not exist for us here. But we do need, I think, to have a more strategic look at least, telling us what your plan is. Tell us what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, so we can perhaps plan together. If we know what the university is planning generally with their 1,500 units, still hoping to see sometime soon some specifics on that. Albemarle County has been going through somewhat the same planning dilemma that we've been going through. And this is not a situation of finger pointing at all. It's simply a reality that I think we would all profit if we can have more deeper conversation about what the planning looks like.
So that's what excites me the most about this body, is this conversation we're having collectively and regionally. We may not be able to formally do it, but we can do it in this format and get a little crosstalk, a little bit of conversation going.
And Emily Dreyfus just piped in on the chat to point out something that I should have pointed out, that the CRHA redevelopment is progressing, bringing 62 new more units to First Street South, and the renovation of Crescent Halls is underway. So number of good things going on.
Thank you for sharing. All righty. Any questions for Lloyd? All right. Margaret Claire, you are next.
I think you guys have said it all, so I'll just stay quiet.
Okay, Margaret. Thank you. Mr. Payne, you are up next, sir.
Yeah, Lloyd touched on a lot, but his point about the comprehensive plan continuing to move forward with the draft land use map, which also has a framework for affordable housing overlays and inclusionary zoning to try to incentivize affordable housing development where density increases as well. And as Lloyd mentions, I think we're nearing, hopefully, the end of that part of the comprehensive plan update with the land use map. We will then move on to the zoning rewrite, which is really the thing that matters the most. And that's where the actual changes will be implemented. And there'll be, that planning on a street by street, parcel by parcel level for what that will actually look like. The land use map is just a very high level general framework. And it's also where the details about the inclusionary zoning, the affordable housing overlay, subdivision rules, et cetera, will get worked out, which will be huge, very, very long overdue. Likewise, as Lloyd said, we have a new NDS director in, as well as a new deputy city manager, Sam Sanders, who oversees neighborhood development services and other housing efforts. And they have some exciting plans for a housing hub within the city, as well as some changes to try to make the permitting process easier, which has been a huge challenge, not only for for-profit developers, but affordable housing developers in the city. And so hopefully that will be a very positive change that is beginning and hopefully will be underway. Our Arpa money from the last stimulus bill from the federal government, we allocated some of that to eviction prevention fund in anticipation of the eviction moratoriums ending. We also allocated some money for emergency bill relief that's open for residents in the city. So we're hoping that those, in combination with the rent relief funds that are being distributed regionally, that will have a positive impact on preventing people from losing housing due to the pandemic. A lot of that ARPA money is still unallocated, so there may be some exciting opportunities for that to be used for affordable housing. That's unknown, but is a potential opportunity area there. And as was said in the chat, our redevelopment of public housing, continues to be funded in our budget and is a huge priority and is a huge transformational project. Likewise, the redevelopment of Friendship Court. And the final thing is we adopted our affordable housing strategy several months ago, but it calls for an investment of $10 million a year into affordable housing. So that's something that we're still working on is, okay, we adopted this plan, how are we actually going to implement it and get that steady funding source, which is not something that's been worked out and settled yet, which will be very important. As for the regional strategic plan, as others have said, I think just being able to connect us with regional partners, not only local governments, but nonprofits. I don't know exactly what they would be, but setting out measurable specific benchmarks and goals, just things that came to mind in this conversation is, what could it look like thinking regionally about the use of a land bank and land trusts to increase affordable housing and wealth building opportunities throughout the region. So I think those are really exciting opportunities. Perfect example is those rent and mortgage relief funds, how we can strengthen the partnerships with local governments. And I think we've been one of, if not the most successful locality in Virginia in getting those distributed quickly. So build on that success. And yeah, just think about specific benchmarks and policies regionally there.
Thank you, Michael. Anybody have any questions for Michael? All right, Mr. Galloway, you up next, sir.
Good afternoon. I lose track of time, so I don't know if we've updated in the quarterly meeting that we did pass Housing Albemarle, our affordable housing policy. So I can't remember if that has now happened before or after the last quarterly meeting, but it is in place. And I know a lot of credit goes to Dr. Pethia for getting all that knocked out and to us, but now it's get down to work and let's figure out how to put that policy and implement that policy. I bring that up is then on the heels of it, just a few meetings ago, our form-based code and our RIO 29 small area plan is one of the first things that I've seen that now just links the pieces that are in Housing Albemarle to the affordable housing requirements in the form-based code. It prior had its own kind of outline of different criteria for affordable housing the components, but it links and parallels to the housing policy now. I think we'll start to see more of that if we implement other small area plans, or if form-based code becomes a conversation in other areas of the county. We'll see. But that's in Albemarle, a big thing that has come along. I'll tie the next comment to something that I would hope our strategic plan will do. We continue, as Diantha, Supervisor McKeel mentioned, about deal with land use applications that has affordability, is a part of it. We just did a very, a big one, the RST development out on 29 North, which got a lot of play, a lot of neighborhood reaction to it, et cetera. But I'm hoping our strategic plan gets at the ancillary items that come along with making affordable housing work for those who need the affordable unit. So that particular development, while it'll bring a lot of affordable units to it, does not currently have a transit line running through it. And okay, so if there's no transit line there, by the time those units come online, then different folks are going to be able to live in there based on affordability of owning a car, updating a car. So how do we start getting at that as a region in ideas and get that into play? So I'm hoping the strategic plan lets us get at those other elements, because there's other things than just transit or car ownership. This body, a few months ago, Keith, as an exercise, was asking people what the value proposition of this, of being a member of this partnership is. And I think that's an important question, but, and Michael might have mentioned it as well with, charting specific goals or objectives and some measurables. But at some point in the strategic plan, we do have to say, okay, if we're asking for recurring funding to come into it, what are the deliverable? What's the return on the investment for those who are putting money into it? The strategic planning has to help us figure that out. And as a collective body, we'll have to figure that out. What will those deliverables be? Part of it, as Keith mentioned, I always get a lot of value out of these conversations. The fact that we have all the regional housing plans in one document, as a supervisor in Albemarle County, I probably would not have looked at some of these other counties' affordable housing policies, but the fact that this body exists and we took the effort and did that, I'm now looking at it, all these other places, and what can I learn from that to help not just fix what's going on in Albemarle with the regional approach. So I'm hoping the strategic plan gets at that too. How do we take all the regional knowledge that we have accumulated, that we have in one place, and turn that into action items to deliver units to people that need them? I think that's a perfect type of question for the strategic plan. Other than that, our board will continue to work on our comp plan. We're doing our own rewrite. I would say that the last time that the Albemarle County Board did their comp plan, I don't recall a ton of conversation, or at least at the same level or urgency of affordable housing as will occur this time. So I'm excited that we'll be doing a comp plan review, and that this topic will be of just a different level of focus, if you would, than was there 5-6 years ago. And it took them 5 years to get through it, which, we won't probably have to get to that level of detail because of the effort they put into it the last time. Same with our strategic plan. And I will leave it at that.
Thanks, Ned. Excuse me. Does anybody have any questions for Ned?
I'm sorry, I got to make one more comment.
Sure.
It was mentioned about headwinds with the county in the one report. And to me, that's like what a regional body can do as well. When I talk about, if I'm watching another jurisdiction help in a process to get some of these things through that perhaps is a headwind in our county, that's an opportunity for us to learn from that and implement that here. So that's something that I'm thrilled that conversation is going on between the county and that's happening. But that's something at a bigger level, that as we watch what other folks are doing with their zoning process or land use applications, if there's things like that we can learn and put into place in our county, we certainly want to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Ned. Any questions for Ned? All right, Sunshine Mathan had to jump off, but as I believe Lloyd said, he put some comments in the feed. If you take an opportunity to read them. In my comments, I'm going to focus on the Piedmont Community Land Trust, talk a little bit about the production we've been able to do since our last meeting. So I believe, if I'm following it right, Chris Henry, I think you're the only person I missed. You're up, Chris. Or did he lose? Did he jump off? Up there's Mr. Henry. Up. Chris, we can't hear you, sir. Still can't hear you, sir. All right. Oh, you're on mute, sir. Nope. Okay, we'll move. I'll move. You want me to move on? Is that what that means? Got it. I got that. That's an old developer trick. Move on. Thank you, Chris. And if you can chime in the chat, maybe that might be helpful for some folks, and particularly from your perspective on the strategic plan and any comments that any of us have been making. So look, we're at 3:23. I want to first and foremost thank everybody on here before I make my little soapbox speech about the Piedmont Community Land Trust and what we were able to do in Albemarle County. Thank you for everybody participating. This is kind of what I was hoping would happen today. A lot of two-way dialogue or engagement and comments. And from my perspective, I took copious notes so we can help move the strategic plan process forward. I do kind of want to play a little bit off of something Ned has said and some of the other folks have said. So those who may not know, I'm going to speak as the chairperson at the moment of the Piedmont Community Land Trust. We are in a partnership with PHA, which is exciting. It's going to be able to grow our capacity, our capability from a fiscal and human resources perspective. But I want to talk a little bit about, what I think this body is all about on how we were successful in a subdivision called Spring Hill. For those who are not aware of it, it's the end of Route 20 and Ivy. No, hold it. Somebody help me out. It's end of Ivy and Route 20, which I can't remember the name of the street at that point. But what we were able to do, and just a simple set of numbers through a partnership with the county who helped us through their profit process, the developer and the builder, in this case was Stanley Martin, a bunch of nonprofits, which would be our nonprofit PH and other folks. We were able to take, and I just want these numbers to absorb, we were able to take $120,000 cash and turn it into 7 affordable housing units, valuing $1.7 million. And these 7 families, their average AMI was somewhere, area median income, somewhere between 60 and 70%. We didn't even make it up to the full 80 in that end of it. And just to put it into a market value perspective, that's 2.2 million. So it's 243,000 per unit times 7. The market value on it is 315. We're in the process of raising another 160, so we can put another 8 units, which will close and be completed, total 15 by the end of the first quarter of next year. So anytime I talk about this, people say you need a lot of money to do this. Not necessarily. What you need is relationships, right? And we were able to bring a relationship to us, and everybody on this call was part of that relationship to make it happen. So at the end of the day, currently we close on our 7th one. $120,000 has put 7 families in homes that are on a bus stop, 3 bedrooms, excuse me, I apologize, 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, 1 car garage, new construction, and it was a win-win. So I just would like to close in that this can be done as long as we all come to the table and agree to work with one another. So I will end my soapbox at that because we're getting close to 3:30. I do want to give the public one other opportunity to chime in. It's not on the agenda, and since we have a couple of minutes, is there anybody in the public that would wish to comment? If so, please raise your hand. Do I see any hands up, Ian? All righty, guys. So next meeting of the full body is December 8th from 2 to 3:30. If you guys have any comments or questions or anything that I could do for you, please reach out to me directly or Ian or Christine, and we will do whatever we can to answer any questions you might have. So I think I'm going to get everybody out here a couple minutes early. Can I get somebody to request an adjournment, please?
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Well done. Thank you very much. I'm assuming if anybody says nay, we'll just talk a little bit longer, but I assume everybody's on board, and have a great day, guys, and we'll see you shortly. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Ian, hang on a second, buddy.